what I would like to talk about is how you got into Scrum. That's really what I'd like to talk about. And so I don't know if you have any stories. I'm sure you do. But what I'm looking for are any stories that you might have about what sort of brought you to the Scrum community. What are some of your thoughts about Scrum? And then finally, what are you currently doing now? So the way that I see it, the interviews are really in three parts. The very first part are, what brought you here? What are your thoughts about Scrum? And finally, what are you doing now? And really the idea of what are you doing now is to find out what's current in your life, but also for you to, if you want to promote something, if you have a book or something that's coming up that you'd like to promote, then please feel free to do so.
Okay. Well, for me, it's interesting is that what brought me to Scrum is I have to go pre-1990 actually, before Scrum existed.
Yep.
And I was maybe 1991. When did Rebecca Werfsbrock's book on responsibility-driven design? That was about 1991 or 1990, something like that. And just before that, the small talk community was just, there was no internet to worry about, so it wasn't being spread as fast as it was, but you could get hearing about it. And so the first few Uppsalas that I went to in the early 90s, I was into use cases and object orientation and small teams and the whole low ceremony stuff that was going on at the time. And it actually matched what I'd been doing in the military for the previous decade. Mm-hmm. And what was funny is I've always how would I put it, my teamwork philosophy comes from the military with the small team, tactical, self-organizing teams, what we call in the military as small unit leadership training, which I had in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And it turns out, as I found out later after I learned about Scrum, that small unit leadership was exactly Scrum. Daily meetings, self-organized discussions, a single commander making decisions about what's next, people helping Scrum mastering everywhere, trying to make people better as you bring them up. And so it was very cool. So I guess it started in 94 or so with object orientation, moving into it. I met Linda Rising. I met Kent Beck at a 94 plop, and we talked about XP. In 95, I was at the same conference. I was actually talking at the same time as Ken Schwaber introduced Scrum. I was cool. Talking about agile use cases and incremental use case development. Mm-hmm. In order to support an XP team, because XP is only about the coding, and
that's right.
How about the on-site customer? And so I said the on-site customer needs to be another XP team, and so I was busy experimenting with that, and then along came Ken and said Scrum, and I said, that's the word. That's what I've been talking about for the last 2 years. So that was funny, and Linda Rising came into my room and said, I just was at Ken's talk. She came in first. I'm not going to come to listen to you, Dan. I love you, but I'm going to go listen to Ken. Then she came back afterwards and says, too bad you weren't there. I'm going, yeah, but I was doing my thing over here. And so that's kind of when it started. And I was doing a lot of DoD kind of stuff,
yeah,
and trying to do this Agile stuff. At the time, there was nobody calling it Agile except the Army,
yeah,
because Army was the Agile was the Army's word. In 1982, this is a funny story. It's in my book. I do have a book. But that in 82, we started doing Agile software development.
Yep.
In the military, and we called it Agile software development.
Were you still part of the military at this point?
In 82, I was.
Yep.
In 96, I was doing DoD contracting.
Right. Okay.
And I stopped that in 96, and I had 10 years in that, and went and did other sorts of contracting. I decided I didn't want to do DoD stuff anymore.
Yep.
And came to Washington at that time in about 97. I was working on a gig down in Northridge, work building an avionics system for the Australian Navy.
Cool.
Which is kind of funny. We were using RUP, and we used a very agile form of RUP where we divided it into small teams, which were made up of 4-person cubes. So we had 4 people on a team, and they were busy working, and we were being use case driven and agile and having daily meetings and lots of feedback from the Aussie pilots, and it was kind of a big Scrum team.
Yep.
The way we were calling them XP teams because we didn't have the word Scrum, but we had XP teams that did the coding, and XP teams that did the analysis, and XP teams that did the management, and XP teams, and it was all connected in a network. And it's no different than the same pattern I'm using now, but now calling them Scrum teams.
Right. Yeah.
So, and then along came the word Scrum. I first heard it in I heard it in 95, but I wasn't using it. And so probably I started using it in 98, 99, something like that. And so I started training in Scrum. When I first met Michael, I was already, Michael James.
Oh, yep, MJ.
Yeah, at Net Objectives. I mean, I was already training in Scrum at that time. Agile use cases, Scrum. We were teaching.
I didn't realize that you and MJ went that far back.
Yeah, I was teaching it. I was working at Net Objectives, and he was at Danube.
Yep.
And I actually taught Scrum to Danube.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, that is interesting.
The first time I met MJ, he was in a room. We were talking about it. I was projecting. We were talking. He was sitting over there, being very snarky and interested, and stabbing back, and it was great fun. And that great sort of love-hate relationship you have with MJ very easily because he's just such an asshole, but he's such a smart asshole that it's worth talking to him. And I'm sure he feels exactly the same way about me. I'm very sure he does, actually. So, we've gotten closer over the years, but that's where it started. So I don't know what year that was. Probably 2001 or something. Yeah. 2002 at the latest. Yeah. And then what happened? Then I went to this. I was in the first or second Scrum class, the first one that was in Washington. Yeah. So I'm Scrum Master number 27.
And this is Washington State, not Washington.
Washington
DC.
State, yeah. He taught. Evidently, it was like the third course or something. I think he taught one in Europe, and then one in a small one in Europe that Boz was in, like the very first Scrum class, and then they taught another one in Boston, in his hometown. He taught another one.
These are
in Seattle.
These are
the first 3 CSM courses. The first ones that he labeled CSM courses.
Yeah.
And gave out certificates.
Yeah. Those 2003, 2004?
2003. I think May 2003, something like that. I think he started in February.
Yeah.
And taught a few classes, and so we put a lot of people there. I was in it. Doug Schimpf was in that class. Rod Clare was in that class, and all 3 of us are trainers now.
Yeah.
So I love this. The Agile stuff is just the right way to go, and I've always thought it was the right way to go. And so I came to it just organically. I was doing it already, and I felt like, okay, the community moved in my direction. They had the Agile Manifesto, which I've never actually signed, nor will I, because I don't believe it.
And why do you say
There's one of the things on the second page that you're also signing up for the 14 statements on the second page that Alistair Coburn wrote.
Yep.
And one of them is, we believe that the best architectures are built by self-organizing teams, and I don't believe that. Mm-hmm. My statement is, I believe the best architectures are developed by geniuses, but you don't have one, so you should use a self-organized team. So that,
you could use
Linux.
You could use that as an excuse for just about anything, though. Could you say that for just about anything? Anything done by a genius is better than something done by an average person.
But that's the only one that's stated like that, though.
Okay, fair enough.
It's the only one that has an absolute. We believe that the best, So I love the manifesto itself, the preferences, and it's not dogmatic, and I used to. It's a rant against large. It's partially a rant against large agility like Scrum, like RUP. And I like RUP. RUP, when done correctly, is a nice agile little thing. It's just
yeah, we're going to have to agree to disagree on that one. Yeah.
No, I've done it that way. It can be done in an agile way.
It can be.
The
but
thing
it
is, it is so
is.
heavy. No, it seldom is. I'm not going to disagree with you on it. It seldom is because it's so heavyweight. You get lost in the details, and you can't find your way to the agility.
Yeah.
There's no doubt of that. But the point is that the philosophy of it is very agile.
Yeah.
It's just it made the mistake of being very big and have to be tailored down.
Yeah.
Whereas Scrum has the advantage of being very small and then it gets tailored up.
That's right.
So that's why I liked about Scrum actually, because it came from it at the right direction. I liked that because it's the big tent. Scrum is the big tent.
Yeah, very minimal.
And so that's why I shifted to Scrum as soon as it became something I could shift to, because it was the big tent, allowed me to fix all the tips and put all the agile tips and tricks that I'd learned over 20 years into that tent, including the large framework stuff, which, by the way, I don't like either Boz's framework or SAFe for lots of reasons, but that's another issue. But I believe there's some really good standard patterns one could use to build a large organization using Scrum. I don't think that's the same as a framework, but it's essentially the same. I think there's patterns to use. I'm finally writing those down, by the way. So that's how I came to Scrum, and I was Scrum trainer number 8. I got certified in the same class with Esther, me and Esther and Ken. And Ken taught a class in 2005 in Seattle, and so that's when I got anointed. And I really liked all the trainers that I've met early on. Clearly, we disagreed about lots of things, but they were.
But that's part of life.
Yeah, it's just supposed to happen, and otherwise it wouldn't be a living thing.
That's right. That's what makes it fun.
Indeed, but I like all the early trainers, and anyway, that's how I came to Scrum. Was Agile for 20 years before there was such a thing as Scrum. But I'm not going to say I was smart enough to be Agile. That's just the way the Army does everything in a tactical way. Yeah. Tactical military work is Agile. Yeah. And so that's how we wrote software. We considered it as a tactical thing, and because we had to produce a product in a short amount of time, and poof, next thing you know, you're doing a pretty good simulation of Scrum.
Yeah. And the Defense Forces are big users, aren't they? Defense Forces worldwide tend to be very big users of Scrum.
Yes, and yet their contractors don't want to do it. So it's like their local teams, the ones you actually have control of, are doing Scrum. When they actually have a big contract, it comes out non-agile.
Yeah.
And that's because you make less profit doing Scrum.
And that's bad for whom?
It's bad for the contractors. They're the ones that don't want to do it.
Absolutely. The
government has mandated it. Actually, it's actually federal law that DoD contracts will be agile. It was passed in 2010.
I thought that was an option. I thought that there was the option to be agile, but that wasn't necessarily.
That's the way it used to be.
Okay.
But the National Defense Authorization Act of 2010, Section 804, I can send it to you, says thou shalt be agile.
I'll trust you on this one.
And please respond within 270 days. And the response was basically, we don't want to do it, from the contractors.
Right.
And so it kind of just slowly got buried. There's still some active work on it. Some PMP DoD types that happen to be trainers are still pushing it, like me and Cheng and a few others. But personally, I'm thinking I'm going to have to stop my focus on going to Scrum gatherings and XP and just spend all my time going to PMI, project management sorts of conferences, and attack it from the other direction. Because trying to move the Agile community towards proper project management and big projects and DoD and government work isn't working. So maybe I could push from the other direction for a while. So anyway, that's the first thing. That's where I came from. And what was your second thing?
What are you doing now?
Well, I'm doing more of the same. I'm writing. I published a book in 2011. I don't know if you got a copy. It's called Exploring Scrum: The Fundamentals.
I haven't got a copy.
I'm really happy with it. It still has legs. Coming out with a second edition pretty soon. Basically getting a prettier cover because the cover sucks. But I got some really good. I got Jeff Sutherland, Ron Jeffries, Jeff McKenna, and Johanna Rothman to write forwards for it.
Cool. Very nice.
So I think I got the best set of forwards around.
So tell us a little bit about the book. What's the premise of the book?
Well, the book basically says, okay, here's the Scrum framework. It's really trivial, and I use the four major sources: the 95 talk, the 2002 book, the 2004 book, the 2007 book, and I guess the Scrum guide. Yeah. And I say, this is what it says. You can see how it's morphed through time. Yeah. Now, what's really going on? That's why it's called Exploring Scrum. What's really going on? What do you really have to do to make it work? Right. And so on. So it's a 300-page book that talks about things like what's missing, like how come the daily Scrum doesn't actually actively talk about reorganizing your day and just talks about gathering information. So everybody thinks it's a status meeting. Well, that's wrong. It's actually about reorganizing. It's an inspect and adapt point. Where's the grooming between the review and the plan in the planning meeting? When does the grooming happen? It's left out. Yeah. Well, that's also a bug in the system. Burn downs are evil. I was the first one to really push the fact that burn downs are evil, and now they've been pretty much removed from Scrum. Yeah. So that was a beautiful thing. I agree.
Sprint burn downs are bad.
Yeah, even the product burn down is bad. Maybe less bad, but still bad. Yeah. Because any proper project, by the time it ends, should have more things on the backlog than when it started. So then the backlog.
Why do you say that?
Because you have to have good stuff to choose from up until the very end, and you can't. The concept of getting done with a feature makes no sense. I mean, I'm a use case guy. There's always more stuff. You just have to decide when to give up.
That's right. Yeah.
And so when you give up, you have to know what you're deciding you're not going to do. Yeah. So you have this. So there's no way you get to the bottom of the backlog. It just doesn't make any sense. So you got to do it some other way. And then so that's one of the big things. Things like that are in the book, talking about velocity and story points and why they're not about effort, but more about size and exactly what does that mean, and stuff like that. How they're useful for project management. Although that book doesn't go into it. The second book I'm writing now does. Okay.
And so is your second book a continuation of the first book?
It's about project management, and the concept being that project management is itself needed. Project managers are not necessarily evil, but also project managers are not on your team. They're outside the team observing the team, and that it's okay to have a management team whose job it is to control the many-to-many relationship between projects and teams. Somebody has to manage that, and somebody also has to make sure that the project's plans match the reality of what's really going on. Right. And so I come at it from the PMI perspective. I got my PMP as well. So I didn't have it when you and I left, but I have it now. And that, how's it go? The project manager has two fundamental jobs. One, create a plan in the first place. And two, keep the plan consistent with reality. Mm-hmm. And bad project managers try to change reality to fit the plan. And good project managers know they're supposed to change the plan. So that's an inherently agile thing. So I talk about the contract between the team and the project manager. Visibility, give him all the information he needs, good decisions on this side. And so I have a hierarchy of leadership, the Scrum Master, the product owner, which is really a role, not a position. So the Scrum Master, the team lead, and the project manager, and different leadership positions, two formal, one informal, and talk about the different things that they balance. What is it that they're balancing? So the Scrum Master is helping the team balance speed versus quality, the team leader is helping balance chores versus capabilities, and the project manager is balancing cost, scope, and schedule. Yep. And then what flows up is a given to you. How fast the team moves is not something you can influence. You've already got people doing that. So this is the whole tiering of agility. That's part of the scaling patterns.
So,
And
is your second book about
that's what I'm
scaling?
trying to work on now. Hmm?
Is your second?
Scaling is like 1/6 of the book, but it turns out that scaling's so big, I may actually divide the book into three. I was thinking about that yesterday.
Right.
One book on sprint planning, release planning, which talks about how to calculate story points, how to do a release plan, how to monitor a release plan. That could be one subject.
Sure.
Another subject is on analysis, which is about Jeff Patton's story mapping, because he's never going to finish his book, and he gave me permission to write about it. and also stereotypes, which I've been talking about for almost a decade now.
Yeah.
And then another one on the scaling, project management and scaling. And those might be three different things. It might be one big book. It was originally designed as one book, but I might just decide to release it as three short booklets. I haven't decided. Short books. My book is self-published through Amazon's CreateSpace.
Okay, cool.
So I show you a copy, but I sold them all today in my class.
I was about to say, I might try and grab a link to it, if that's all right. I'll try and grab a link, and I'll put it, when I write up a blog post about this, I'll include the link as well, so that people can link through to your book. I'm assuming that...
Here's the name. That's the name. Exploring Scrum: The Fundamentals. 2011. You can find it on Amazon for sure.
Okay.
And
I'll do that. I'll look it up, and I'll include a link so that if people are interested, they can go through and buy the book.
Yes, and you should read it. I think you'd like it. You know, you could see some of the discussions we've had in there. A lot of the discussions you and I had, and me and Michael have had, me and Ron Jeffries have had, have made their way into the book. I give a little bit. I don't give a lot, but I learn. I adapt. And so I really want to keep the project manager outside the team. That's a key lesson. I think the current trend towards thinking that the Scrum Master can be the project manager is just the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Not a good idea.
No, it's in your typical droll, understated way. Yes, it's just the stupidest thing I've ever seen. That is truly evil. There's no way that could possibly be good.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Absolutely. Yeah.
And technically, if you only had a project coordinator, it could work if you had a very mature team and you had a safe organization. But you know what? It's still risky. So I think for the same reason, the product owner and the Scrum Master should not be the same person. The project manager should be neither of those people for the same reason, because it's always about the mischief you can call and the mischief you can change, and not having the right conversations being had in the open. You need these people to fight in the open. That's the idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you need that project manager be yet another person, so that the appropriate fights can be had in the open as well.
You got to have that separation of responsibility.
Separation of responsibility and accountability. Absolutely. Your head hurts if you try to do two of those things at the same time.
Absolutely.
And luckily nobody fights with me on that. They do say that, well, there is no project manager in Scrum. And I say, absolutely. Nobody said there was. But that doesn't mean you can't use Scrum to do project management. And certainly a team that is using Scrum to build their stuff often has to be managed. So there must be some project management there somewhere. Agreed, it's not part of your Scrum toolbox, but it is in your management toolbox. Just like XP isn't part of Scrum, but God knows we'd love to have that on our Scrum team.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But there's a lot of true believers that really don't understand what's really going on. It sounds like they've never really developed anything. Or maybe they had one successful project using Scrum and now they're born-again Scrumsters. I'm not sure. And sometimes I think that some of the trainers are doing more harm than good by being, very evangelical.
Yeah.
Instead of pragmatic.
That's
one thing I liked about you. I always thought you were pragmatic. We may have disagreed on what the answer was, but it's always about building something, not about following the rules.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Getting value for money at the end of the day is really what it's all about. You need to deliver a product at the end of the day.
Yeah, one of my current arguments, which I think you'll appreciate, whether even if you don't approve, is you're supposed to maximize ROI, but how can you do that? You're not actually getting any R. But I look at on a Scrum team that's doing software development, the development team, not the management team. There could be two different Scrum teams, but the development team's ROI is maximizing the value of the feedback for the money.
Yeah,
because that's your return. So you're trying to maximize the meaningful feedback every sprint for the money you spend, which leads to some very interesting things that can cause some major wars. For example, maybe it makes more sense to actually produce a prototype to maximize feedback, to do a spike, right, of some sort to maximize feedback rather than the real thing. And so this leads to an interesting definition of what product is, or potentially shippable, which just drives me nuts, or whatever. And so I have a chapter in there that you should read. It's at the beginning of the product section. It's like, what is product anyway? And I thought that we were headed in the right direction. I'll just tell you, for a moment in 2010, Ken wrote a Scrum guide that stopped calling things product and called them work results.
Yeah, that's right.
And for a moment, I was going, yes, 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 yes. And then he went back to product. Oh, what happened?
Who
talked about it,
That's a really interesting point of view, that you should be maximizing feedback every single sprint.
Maximizing the value of the feedback.
Yeah.
So that the whole purpose of agility, the way we practice it, is to modify your priorities based on frequent, meaningful feedback.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Without question.
One sentence discussion of what agility is, as we currently do it.
Yeah.
And that the product owner's job is to maximize the value of the feedback. And then it's the project manager's job to put the right stuff in the backlog to get the delivery out the door for the right product. Mm-hmm. And that in Scrum tends to conflate that project management and team leader job together, which is what causes evil product owners, because they're trying to do both the project management and maximize value, and those really aren't the same thing. And so I'm saying, no, separate those. The same reason we separated the project manager in the first place to a product owner and a Scrum Master, the team. Let's separate again and pull just the management out, and then the flow management is a project. The team leader is about flow.
Yep.
Having the team maximize value sprint to sprint and maintain its ability to maximize value from sprint to sprint. Yep. And those are the two things you have to do. And if you start acting like a project manager, you stop maximizing the ability to provide value by creating technical debt, because you value short-term gain over long-term gain and all this other stuff. And so that, I think, is the issue we're fighting now.
Yep.
With teams and that are trying to, because somebody sold people on Scrum. Scrum is a way to get product out the door faster, and they think that's the goal: product out the door faster. And I try to explain, no, that's a byproduct of doing the right stuff. It goes out the door faster because you do this other stuff and you concentrate on this, and then that just happens.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't thought about it enough to either agree with you or disagree with you. But that's a very interesting. Very interesting take on it. It's quite different too. I think it would lead to some really different points of view. That particular thought. I'll have to think about it. I'll have to think about it and get back.
Well, that's why I'm telling you. I'd love to have you think about it. I value your ability to think about it, and I can't say that about everybody, Kate.
That is interesting. Maximizing the value of your feedback.
Maximizing the value of your feedback. That's actually what the product owner is trying to do.
Yeah.
Because you're maximizing the value of your work results.
Yeah.
Right? And what is your work result? A reviewable increment.
Yeah.
Right? So what's the value of a reviewable increment? The quality of the review you can get from it.
Yeah.
Because you're not actually shipping it. And that's why you have different kinds of sprints. Most sprints are just about the review, but some sprints actually push things out the door.
Yeah.
So the product doesn't actually get reviewed, because in the middle of the sprint, you put it out into production.
Yeah.
So there isn't actually a review. It's a review of, is it out there or not? But it's not a review of the product anymore. So that becomes an interesting issue. So That's not even a sprint the way we would normally think of it with a feedback loop. There's no feedback loop in a release sprint. You pushed it out the door, you're done.
Yep.
There's no feedback for that.
Well, maybe the feedback is the fact that it's been used by customers at the end of the
that's
day.
exactly. That would be what you would review. Is it actually out there? Is it actually being used?
Are people actually using the product? Do they really care about it? Are they paying money for it?
But you don't have a sprint review for that, right? It's not in your sprint review. That's the ongoing review after release. So it's a different kind of review.
You could do. You could use your sprint review as part of that.
Absolutely, you could. So, did it get released? Is it in people's hands?
Yeah.
But you released it yesterday. You don't have any feedback about whether it's worth a shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the long term, and that's the feedback that the product manager is going to be getting through time, because that's his job. Is how did my release do in the field, and do people like it, and what do they want next? I mean, he's the product owner in the sky, right? The product manager. He's got multiple teams working for him. He's got project managers working for him. They're all part of his management team in some sense. And then down here you got developers doing the work, and they can't possibly figure out or determine if it's really useful in the field. That's this guy's job up here. And he might even have a marketing team or something that's actually doing that. That's their product, is determining what needs to be done next. So when you get in a big organization, you have these little teams everywhere. Each of these little teams could be a Scrum team, because they're doing something complex, and each of them needs a product owner to determine what to do next, and then it all ties together. Next thing you know, you've reinvented an army type structure.
Yeah,
you really have no choice. Because it's the same problem, and then the army's had 5,000 years of designing the solution, and so it's pretty optimized at this point. And plus they've also optimized it so that just about anybody can do the job. You don't need heroes. So that's another good point, I think, because we have too many organizations that are relying on a hero filling 2 or 3 jobs at once, and you don't happen to have a heroic person filling that hero job. So so that's another issue. But these are the things I coach. I love coaching more than training.
Excellent.
So anyway, I don't know what to do with the book. I'm thinking about it. I've written 80 pages just on story points.
That's a lot of pages on story points, I have to admit.
Well, it talks about lots of stuff. It talks about what you want them for, like story points are your poker chips, and you earn story points, and you spend story points, and you budget with story points, and budget and story points are not about actual effort. At any given point, the conversion rate changes based on environmental variables like technical debt and how good your team is and stuff like that.
Complexity, all that sort of good stuff.
And then I have a couple of really good pages, really good chapters about estimating epics and why we have a tough time estimating the number of story points required for a use case, for example. Yeah. And I bring in cosmic function points and Cosmic function points, it's about cosmic function points are about data movements. So if you look at a sequence diagram, how many times does an arrow cross the boundary of your system? And that's how complicated that flow is. And the idea, which has been around now for 30 years, is that basically a use case point, which is very much like a function point, is counting the number of function points are involved in a given flow.
Right.
And so what I do is I say, okay, so a use case is implemented by scenarios. Scenarios have single acceptance tests. Single acceptance test means there's a story. It also means there's a sequence diagram, at least conceptually, which means there's a size, function point size, and that's the number of story points that you should have. So you're trying to approximate the functional complexity in some sense for your story points.
Sounds awfully complex.
No, it's actually very simple. You do it with the same estimation game, but you have to just use estimation game with stories that have known function point counts. And then you then talk about size and moving parts and not effort. You say you have to ignore the. And so the way in the book I mentioned, I talk about inherent complexity. In the next book, I talk about ideal effort, which is the effort, how much effort it should take.
Mm-hmm.
If you had a great team, there was no technical debt, your subject matter experts were available, how much effort it should take.
Yeah.
And the beauty about how much effort it should take is it falls right into project management's earned value stuff, because earned value is the effort it should take. So, you're familiar with earned value?
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
So, that's the effort it should take. And so I've been doing CPI and SPI for years,
Yep.
Based on story points. And the project managers, and so the project manager uses story points as his budgetary instrument rather than dollars.
Yeah.
And then he has a conversion to dollars, another assumption, hours per story point or dollars per story point, which is another variable he has to monitor against. And so that's what I'm working on now. And it's pretty straightforward. I think I don't know. From a project management perspective, it's much simpler. It's much simpler than project management we currently do.
Absolutely, I don't disagree with that. I think that's absolutely true.
And it ties much more closely to the way we're supposed to write good software with XP. I mean, it actually, if you're writing software the right way, project management is easy. If you're writing software the wrong way, project management is hard. So it becomes project management trying to do it becomes a motivator to actually write good code, which is kind of interesting. The first book really talks a lot about technical debt as the killer. Second book talks about technical debt as well. How do you manage it?
Mm-hmm.
And my idea there, by the way, is that you separate it. You think about it separately. I have to deal with it at the same time as the functional stuff. But in terms of stories, I have one story that's adding the functionality and another story that's mitigating the technical debt. They each have story points, even though I'm doing it at the same time. But that makes it easier to manage.
So why does that make it easier to manage? I would have thought that made it harder to manage if you separate the two out.
Well, because I know the size for the functionality in terms of the cosmic function points, and then I have a time-boxed story point estimate for the mitigation of the technical debt. And even though I'm doing it at the same time, it makes it easier to manage from a project management perspective, because I can have a budget of chore points for removing technical debt and a budget of function points, and then I can say, this one it's this much functionality, but because it's a mess, have another 8 story points to clean things up.
Right. Okay.
Story points worth of cleanup.
So you're talking about making it explicit so that product owners can understand the difference between new functionality versus technical debt.
Yeah, the whole idea is from a project management perspective, you don't want to see a beautiful velocity and think you're actually getting something when really a lot of these points are being spent to mitigate technical debt, so you're really not getting anything. So you want to break them out explicitly and say yes, and actually make decisions to do it.
Yeah, or more correctly, you're not getting anything. You're not getting anything new in terms of new functionality, but you are getting something. You're getting cleaner code.
Yes,
but you're not getting
cleaner code. You're getting the ability to maintain your velocity. There's lots of things you're getting, but what you're not getting is functionality.
Yeah, new functionality.
You're not getting any additional size.
Yes.
But you are getting additional value.
Yeah.
And so this whole issue of value versus size versus business value versus effort is one that can make your head hurt.
Absolutely.
But it's also one that you need to understand if you're actually going to manage an agile project.
Yeah.
And so that's why you get 80 pages. So that a project management type can understand that this isn't just sitting down and managing a spreadsheet. You have to make decisions. You have to understand what's going on. And we on the development side are going to make these things visible to you so you can manage.
Yeah.
And you're going to make good decisions based on what we tell you, so you better fucking understand this. Right? And so it's going to require a whole new category of Scrum Masters that can go in and describe Agile project management to organizations and be part of the transition Scrum mastering thing, and how do we move to proper and scaling and all that kind of stuff. A whole new category of Scrum Masters.
You don't see that as being part of an Agile coach or the role of an Agile coach?
Yes, but I don't know the difference between an Agile coach and a Scrum Master. I mean, I agree that I think a Scrum Master has that Agile coach facet. Now, if you want to go, and I'm fine with that, saying the Scrum Master is on the team, and when he comes out and outside the team, then he's an Agile coach. I actually call the Scrum Master the team coach, because Scrum Master is a role. And then I have a team coach and another coach up here is the Scrum Master of this management team, and another, so somebody who comes out would be called a team coach, but of a different team. But from the Scrum perspective, he'd be that team's Scrum Master. So you'd have a management team's Scrum Master who would be an Agile coach. And we're putting together this kind of mastering agility series concept to fight the scaling guys and say, I don't want to teach people how to follow a framework. I want to teach people a set of patterns they can actually use and teach them how to use it, which is different.
And is this work that you're doing with Doug at Threeback, or is this part of the plop stuff that's currently going on?
I'm not doing any of the plop stuff. I look at those patterns and I just want to retch. So it's so naive and simple. I mean, it's just disgustingly bad from what I can see. And so I'm just not going to go there. I gave people permission to put my patterns. I have a pattern on I have 2 gasps on a startup sprint and a release sprint.
Yep.
Very simple patterns, but they already caused a shitstorm. There are no special sprints, and I say, sure there are. It's not a Scrum thing, but it's a way to use Scrum.
Yeah.
And so somebody said, are they posted anywhere else? And I said, they're posted on the Agile Atlas where they should be posted. He says, I mean, for the plop stuff, if you want to go and put it in plop and reference the Agile Atlas where they're written, go right ahead.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to worry about that. I'd rather put my own patterns together. I tried to see if any of the patterns were useful, and I just went, no, these are all over the map. It's like reading 70 random pages of, the Ward Cunningham wiki.
Yeah.
It's just, so maybe it'll come together as a pattern language, maybe, but that won't be the medium for it.
Yeah.
Probably.
So what is it that you and Doug are doing? Are you putting together some patterns for large-scale Scrum?
I'm putting together some patterns, and I think it'll be part of our Mastering Agility series that we're putting together.
Okay.
Because right now we're teaching a lot of people how to be very dogmatic about Scrum.
Yeah.
And that bothers us.
And I think that's almost universally true where I've seen people do Scrum. So whether in the US or here in Australia, there is quite a lot of dogma.
Yes, and that's scary.
Yeah.
And because where there's dogma, there's failure, and then you can blame it on the dogma.
Yeah.
And rather than the fact that you didn't think about what you were doing.
Yeah.
And I don't know what you do. I explain it to my classes. That's the key lesson is it's not about the framework. The framework is trivial. It's how you think about the framework, and that's what the course is about, what to think about.
And how do you apply it?
Yeah, and right, exactly. And are you doing with good intentions?
Yes.
And are you doing it while living the values? Are you doing it, those are the things that count. And when you look at the framework, the values don't even show up in the framework.
Yeah.
And I say, but the values are like, or values in general are like the most important thing. Just the simplest thing. There's a very simple rule that has nothing to do with Scrum, but Scrum takes it for granted, and that is don't assign people to projects, assign projects to teams.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And we see all the time matrixed organizations putting together Scrum teams out of part-timers. And you look at that, and you say, how can you even think that's Scrum? I mean, what?
And as soon as the project's over, they disband them, and then they form a new team from another group of people.
And the thing is, but I'm talking about, each individual in the team is working on 3 different Scrum teams. Part-time, 40% on this and 40% on that. I see that all the time. And you go, how could that possibly, what?
How's that going to work?
How's that going to work? I mean, having teams that get disbanded, yes, that's terrible. But this is just not even Scrum by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
And yet there's nothing that I can find anywhere that's written by the luminaries in Scrum that says you can't do that.
Yeah, that's right.
Except you see some stuff, your teams are supposed to be, full-timers. That's about as far as they go. But it doesn't say they must be full-timers, otherwise they can't self-organize. So don't even try it without doing full-timers. Don't even go there. Yeah. It's not stressed.
Yeah.
And so it's just one more trivial little rule to break. which of course you can break because we're self-organized, so the rules are just rules. So we just make shit up and call it Scrum. Right?
That
what I'm
sounds,
talking about.
That sounds very much like the argument that these are agile methods, and because they're agile methods, we can change the practices because we're supposed to be agile. Because agile means that we can change things at will.
Exactly. and then that immediately segues into, this is the same shit we've always done, just with another name.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, those are kissing cousins right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Next thing you know, 6 months down the line, you're doing waterfall again.
Yeah, and it's not working, and now you're blaming Scrum. I mean, that's the thing and somehow we as an industry have to fight back and say, no, that ain't Scrum.
Yeah.
You know, there really has to be some things that are sacred. There's not many, but there should be a couple.
Yeah. Iterative waterfall is actually quite common here in Australia. You know,
but iterative waterfall is perfectly okay. It's not as good as Scrum would be if you did it right, but it's better than Scrum done wrong.
It's very common for people to do iterative waterfall and call it Scrum, not call it waterfall.
I'm actually okay with that.
Really? Why do you say that?
Well, because they could decide, because the Scrum team could decide to self-organize and have their sprints as being waterfalls as part of their self-organization. If that's all they know how to do, and that's all they could possibly do, there's nothing wrong with having a sprint being a fixed length in time waterfall.
But there's nothing changing their behavior.
Yes, there is, because they're doing feedback every month instead of. So there's nothing changing the coding behavior, but the feedback every month is completely changing the project behavior.
The project behavior may change, but the individuals within the project, their behavior never changes.
But the project behavior is what's going to provide the success for the organization. So from the standpoint of a more successful organization, that increases the probability of success for an organization. Therefore, it's not a bad thing. It's not what I would like to see.
True, absolutely, yeah.
But it's not a bad thing. It is a changing one big waterfall into 5 small waterfalls is a significant improvement.
Very similar to doing RUP.
Yes, it is exactly what doing RUP, right? RUP was iterations of waterfalls of iterations of waterfalls.
Yep. Which
is just like, ooh, that is so cool. And it is, if you do it right, if you can understand it.
If you like waterfall.
Cool. No, but you know, there's nothing wrong with waterfalling one story at a time either. We'd rather swarm on a story, but there's nothing wrong with waterfalling a story at a time through members of your team.
I'm not sure that I would agree with that, simply because it doesn't change the behavior of the team, and for me that's the important thing.
Well, it depends on where you are, where you stand.
Yeah,
I believe it's an important thing. But I believe the important thing is increasing the probability of success for the organization.
Yeah.
That's why we're here. It would be nice to make the people into better developers, which would also increase, you know. But you could make them into better developers and more agile as a team within the concept of a waterfall at the project level.
True. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
And that would be much worse than changing the project into iterations, each of which was a waterfall.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Now, clearly, the right thing to do is to do both.
Yeah. Do Scrum.
But if I was going to pick one, I would change the product ownership behavior before I changed the developer's behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point.
If I only had to pick one.
Yeah.
And we usually go the other way. We really focus on the self-organization because it's really cool to the geeks teaching Scrum to focus on the self-organization.
I think you get more bang for your buck if you change or if you optimize the product owner role, though. But I also think that's a very difficult thing to do.
I don't. That's something you can come at from the PMI perspective and work at the PMO and change and do the military thing where you're supposed to be agile. And we are going to deliver in increments that we get feedback on,
yep.
And we're going to deliver every 3 months.
Yep.
So you change it from a 3-year project into 12 3-month projects.
Yep.
And that really increases the probability of success of the project. And that's product owner behavior.
Yeah.
But the military talks about it. They talk about physical agility and mental agility. And the framework in Scrum gives you the physical agility. You have the ability to get feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? But if you don't react to the feedback and be smart, then you're not mentally agile, and the framework doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So you need your product owners to be mentally agile.
Yeah.
That's the number one thing I think that would make a difference. Actually, I talk about the three biggest problems that Scrum Masters face, and that's one. Proper decision making in the business, which is product ownership, and the second one is we write bad code, so we write code that won't change easily.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third one for me is self-organization, because I really wouldn't expect self-organization until we're in a relatively safe environment and we're not ashamed of our code. Then we could become self-organized.
Yeah.
And so, that's the way I see it. And so I want to focus personally on the product ownership as usually being the biggest problem.
Yeah.
And simultaneously get an XP coach in there to work on the or a Scrum coach to come in and work at the self-organization and the better code writing practices at the team. But I think you want to attack both of these things. And the one I'm interested in is this one up here because nobody else is doing it.
Yeah.
And the people that are talking about frameworks are talking about frameworks as if they're magic processes again.
That's right.
They just
plug it
happen
in
all by
and away you
themselves.
go. Yeah.
Yeah, and so and I'm saying no. The practices can't do anything. It's the people that do it. The practices just give them a framework within which they can think correctly. The same reason you just can't pluck anybody off the street and make him a battalion commander. You've got to learn how to make those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And just having the framework around you will not make that happen.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm coming from. And by the way, trying to write that down in a book so it won't be misunderstood is proving to be virtually impossible. I mean, I'm
writing is hard. Writing is really tough.
Writing is really hard, and writing about that sort of thing where you're
Yes.
fighting the culture and trying to change the culture and trying to make it so people can't misunderstand it. Because every Scrum book that's been written so far, pretty much, it can be willfully misunderstood very easily.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, my book is 360 pages long. I keep trying to plug all the holes and say exactly what I mean. And if somebody says blah, 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 I can usually point to a paragraph that says no, exactly not. See, there's a paragraph that says that's not true. So if you actually, it'd be hard to wiggle through there incorrectly.
Yeah.
But that also makes the book hard to read. It's like being beat over the head by me, and that's no fun. When you get a conversation with me, I can beat you over the head for hours. And so the book is kind of like that, but hopefully
I always learn something and I always laugh a lot, so it's always good.
well, that's my job. That's my mission. I'm also learning too. I like the way Michael says it. Dan he'll listen to your argument, he'll say you're absolutely right, and then tell you why you're wrong. And I say, but you are absolutely right, and I'm just telling you what you actually meant to say. Because that's the thing. Everybody's got it in their head right. It just doesn't come out right all the time.
Yeah.
And not everybody, but the trainers that I respect, it's in their heads right, but sometimes it doesn't come out right.
Yeah. It's hard. Communicating is
people
tough.
can misunderstand it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's a tough job. I always thought you were fairly good at it. You're a little more formal than me.
Yeah. And I think in large part because of just my experiences in software, because I went through very formal project management training, and I've tried to leave that behind, but some of it I still find very difficult to leave behind. And formality is what I do tend to find hard to leave behind.
Yeah, I understand. I had to learn how to do formal military briefings.
Yeah.
But
I'm sure that was fun too.
Never actually did them.
Yeah.
I was once castigated for it. So your pointer management looks like you're sword fighting. As actually was a comment from a 2-star general one time, and my response was, "Thank you, General."
Well,
and
what
he didn't know what to say to that. He had no idea what to say to that.
Oh, too funny.
But yeah, the thing is that a lot of that formal project management stuff, you need to go back and look at it look at the theory, and a lot of that theory that we learned back in the 80s of formal project management, the philosophical underpinnings are correct, absolutely totally correct. What isn't correct is the Tayloristic management principles that go along that are the next level up about how to apply the theoretical underpinnings. But you can use the theoretical underpinnings about the math and sizing and things like that talks about project management, work breakdown structures, and all that kind of stuff, and do it in an agile way the next layer up. What happens at first layer, we get the Tayloristic, fungible human being management, which is coming at it the wrong way, but you can take all that stuff and move it directly into Scrum. And that's what I've been piecing together for the last 10 years is trying to plug all the holes and make all the Lego blocks fit and come up with a unified theory. And I think that I'm there now.
A unified theory of Scrum.
No, a unified theory of getting project management into Scrum. The unified theory of Scrum already existed. I mean, it's pretty simple. Where are the variables and where are the simplifications and stuff? But there's some interesting stuff about the S-shaped curve of value delivery and things like that. Like, just for example, give you one, the standard S-shaped curve for value delivery that we learned. It says this is effort, so think of that as an expenditure of story points, and this is accumulation of value. Think of that as function points. Story points going this way, function points coming out this way. And you can draw a really nice curve. The S-shaped curve completely matches what you would get by actually doing the stories in exactly the right order. All the architecturally significant ones first, and then the must-have scenarios and the nice-to-have. You get this graph that goes like this, and then this, and then this, and it completely matches the standard S-shaped curve. It's amazing. And then, of course, that's not what really happens because you do them in an opportunistic way, so it kind of wanders. It doesn't go up the curve.
That's right. It goes up and down and all over the place sometimes.
But the beauty of it is, what that tells me, though, is if you use the curve as a way of estimating how much effort you need to produce so many must-have scenarios, right? Because the middle part of that S-shaped curve is the must-have scenarios. So if you know that the must-haves are this big, you need this much effort. Well, that's still true. Okay? And so that's how you can estimate a use case. I have must-haves, and I need to multiply by 3, or 2.5, actually, or something. And so, bang, you have an answer. Now your job is to spend it wisely by using a product owner to prioritize rather than a plan to prioritize.
Yep.
And the beauty of it is, and you'll like this one, I know you will, the last half of the S-shaped curve, this part here, is an 80-50 curve, which is halfway between perfect, 80-20, and totally random, which is 80-80. So that you would expect a product owner to be able to take you up an 80-50 curve. So the thing is, that now you know the curve is the same, whether you use the perfect plan or just a random product owner. See, that's the key thing. A random product owner is as good as the perfect plan, perfectly followed.
Yep.
So you say, so that's actually the reason you would be agile, because any old person can be better than a plan, as good at or better than a perfect plan. But the budgeting is still the same. But you also have to know that what you've actually budgeted for the must-haves, you also know that you don't know exactly what the must-haves are, so you just have to estimate how many of them will there be in this use case. So now you have small, medium, large use cases lead to a certain number of story points, blah, 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 and there's your release planning. And it's something that works. I mean, it's amazing. And people can understand it. And project managers looking to understand it, more importantly, so they'll let you do it. And you can get nice CPI and SPI graphs out of it. And so all the things that they want to see are there. But you still get to be totally agile under the covers.
To me, it sounds like far too much mathematics.
But none of it affects the team. It's the only thing that affects the team is what's next on the product backlog.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so you let the project managers do all that.
You let the project managers and the team leaders together manage that many-to-many relationship between each of the project backlogs and the team backlogs.
Yep.
And so, and all of a sudden, bang, you have a program management, actually, because it's many projects. You have a program management team job it is to keep the backlogs, the team backlogs, and the project plans in sync. And that's that team's job. That's its product. And, when you come at that way and you use it a pattern, there's a program management team would be a pattern. A development team would be another pattern. You stick them together like Lego blocks and you get a big, ugly organization, right? Which, watching flows of priorities coming in and getting sorted out and then coming in and getting sorted out. And then at the bottom, people actually doing work and then rolling it back up. It makes as much sense. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. It does make sense. You can actually do it as well. Mm-hmm. But it makes as much sense as all the crap we learned with work breakdown structures and waterfalls and everything else. It's just as beautiful a model.
Yeah.
But you can actually do it. And it's agile.
Yeah.
But it requires a lot of people willing to be product owners and make decisions. And that's the tough point.
Yeah.
Because you don't have a plan to fall back on. It was your call.
Yeah.
And so we changed the fact we're following a plan blindly with we're following a leader blindly who's making decisions. Yeah. And you have a hierarchy of leadership. And like I say, you wind up reinventing an Army division or something equivalent, which we already know is the largest successful agile animal made out of people. That we've seen that many times. So, the pattern works. We already know it works. It works in a very complex domain called warfare. It's not going to work it'll work in a very complex domain called software.
Yeah.